Hey everybody, how you doing? Let's take a look at Module 3 and what we'll be doing this week in our work. So Module 3 works on the you say. This is your reaction to something that you experienced, something you've read, something that you've learned. Okay, this is a very common type of assignment that you will get in many of your college classes. This is also something that you will be doing a lot of in your professional career. Like this was my takeaway, right? Like I did this thing, whatever the thing was, right? I went to a court case. I had this one patient present with these symptoms. In my daycare setting, I did whatever, right? Like there's always going to be this kind of tell me what it was like. What was your takeaway? What did you learn from this, right? And this is the you say part. And last week we were really working with the they say, like that's the summary of what did someone else say and how do you relate that. Today we're going to do that you say. Now, you read this, you experienced this, you did this. What did you learn? What did you take away? What did you think? So we have our module materials here. We have our assignments, our course objectives that you can take a look at. We get into some instructional tutorials, and then we're going to get into our first assignment, which is the closed research theme reading check-in. And this is where you're going to take two readings. Okay, you're going to go in and you're going to have two readings that you have not yet read. Okay, and then you're going to react to them. And in number 3 here gives you some things to think about and ways that you can respond. Okay. Now remember, the idea of these check-ins is to give you a chance to sample other people's work, like all these other works, right? Because there's all these readings in the closed theme. You're not going to read all of them, right? If I just had a big pile of them there and you never had to interact with any of them, when I say pick a new one, you'll just blindly pick one and off you go. But through these check-ins, you get to sample different readings. And then when people use those in their discussion boards and in other activities, you get to see what they read and their kind of take. So in the end, you've had some sort of experience or at least some familiarity with a whole lot more text than you would have on your own. So always think about, picking something that it's okay to look at some, to kind of go in one, start reading one, and then say that this one isn't for me. That's fine. But don't be afraid to pick something that looks really different. Like, okay, let me try that one, right? Like I read this thing and you don't have to stick with just kind of these similar pieces. Try something different. Don't be afraid to really look around. Okay. And then this is an interesting line here, number 4. And I just kind of like to build on this idea for a second. This idea that you could like work in a word processor and attach a file. You can do that. But I really think that the interesting point of that, and this goes for discussion boards too, is that you have a lot more tools available to you in a word processor than you do in this check-in, right? Like when you go in the check-in, you just type and hit submit. But if you have a word processing, like Google Docs, Microsoft Word, whatever, you have all those tools. You have grammar check, spell check. You have all those kind of tools that you can use, right? But it's also, you don't have to post right now. You can work on it. You can come back to it after a while, rethink it, add, subtract, whatever, edit it, kind of clean it up, and then you can copy and paste it in there, right? I really like this idea of using a Word doc to create your work because it creates a way or an environment in which you are more likely to edit and turn in really good, clean work, right? That's well thought out. So this is like kind of a really it's kind of a place that really could help you improve your work. Instead of you just type something in, you don't have any tools and you just hit submit. This gets you a place where you can stop and think and slow down and work. So if you do use that, that would really probably help you out. And it would also help you out on our discussion boards too, which is our next big assignment. Not the biggest assignment for the week, but it's our next big one. And what you're going to do is you're going to take one of your closed theme readings that you've looked at, and then you are going to write you're going to actually in your initial post have 4 takes on it. You're going to have a yes, a no, and an okay. And these were outlined in chapter 4 of They Say, I Say, right? Like these are different approaches of how you could come at a text, okay? So what you're going to do is, again, you're going to pick a closed theme reading, and then you're going to write the disagree, and explain why, right? And they talk about that on page 58. And then you're going to have an agree, but with a difference, okay? And that was on page 60, 62. And then you agree and disagree simultaneously, which you saw on page 63 and 65. And then you're going to evaluate your responses. And so we really want to see you come at this text and really kind of work over what a response could look like. Your initial response should be at least 150 words. Okay, so it should be of a fairly decent length where you really explain yourself some, and then you're going to respond to at least 2 more posts, and then they give you some ways to some things to think about in your responses. Now, I just want to remind you of a couple things about your discussion board, and I'll start with this idea of that word processor. In your discussion board, you only have 2 options: save and post. As you create, it's save, or it's post or delete. Post or delete. Those are your only 2 options. There is no save option, right? I think I said save a second ago. I'm sorry. There's only 2 options: you post it or you delete it. And sometimes you just don't, you can't just post right then, right? Like, I know that like a lot of us, we sit down, we do our work, and we hit post, right? But maybe you get interrupted, or something happens and you can't finish, right? And you might lose your work. I always recommend that you use a word processor to create your response, and then you can copy and paste it. Okay, that's fine. But like I just said a little bit ago, this idea of this word processor, because it has all those tools, and it's a place where you don't have to do something immediately, it does promote that thought. It does promote that reflection and editing and revising and making sure the best work gets posted, right? So that is definitely a key for you to help you get the most points. Another thing you can do to help you really build up your points is to make sure that your posts are complete and well-rounded and stand on their own. That is huge, right? That is big. You shouldn't have questions. There shouldn't be like, what do you mean by this? And what was she thinking about that, right? Like it stands on its own. We know exactly what you mean. Well developed, well defined. And then your responses to people should continue that conversation, right? Not a, hey, that was really great, I totally agree with you. It's that, and then why, right? Like, yeah, and you add to it. You continue the conversation. If you don't agree with it, that's fine, right? Like, I didn't really see that in this. I saw this, right? Like, this was my take on it. And so it continues the conversation. It builds on what was said and takes it in another, or continues in that direction, right? So really think about how that happens. Make sure that you're coming in and out of the discussion board on multiple days, right? Like you post your initial post, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and that you're posting on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. That this is a conversation. And if you just post and reply all at the same time, you're going to miss different people's perspectives. You're going to miss different things of what was brought up or suggested or said. You're going to miss those things. Or maybe somebody replies to you and you can reply to them, right? Like it's a conversation. And so to get the most possible points, you have to be on multiple days. And then doing more than the expected. The expectation is that you reply to 2 people, but there is a place on that rubric, remember, that you've seen where it's replied to 3 or more, right? So to get those most possible points, make sure you're doing these kinds of things. And then we turn our attention to the big assignment, the big thing, which is finishing the first writing assignment, the first big paper that you've done in this class. Last week, you produced and turned in the half draft, right? Like this was my first take. This is my first chunk of the paper, right? That's what you did last week. This week, we're going to finish it. Your final product should be 750 words and should either be an APA or MLA style. Now, I allowed you to use either style. You could do either style you chose, depending on which one you're more comfortable with. Or what your profession kind of prefers or falls in, right? Like your future major or your what kind of work you'll be doing. They have different styles that they rely on, and so that would you have that option to pick the one that is most relevant to you. And then let's take a look at like what the final paper will really look like. So we have an introduction. And that introduction is where you grab our attention, you get us excited about reading, you pique our interest, you want us to read, we want to read because of what you wrote. And you have a really strong thesis statement. Now, in the introduction or the thesis, you have to have the title and author of this work. We have to see that up front. Probably best in the introduction. It could be in the thesis, but we have to have that. And your thesis statement should have some sort of your take. Like, where are we going with this? You appreciate it. You liked it. You were intrigued. You were shocked. You were whatever, right? And so that we really get to see some of that in the thesis. We know where this is going. We have a summary of the close read theme. This is where you retell the work for somebody else. When the way I like to describe summaries, and I think I used something very similar to this last week, was how would you retell it to somebody else if you had 1 minute, right? Like, you got 1 minute, go. Or if you came up and you said, hey, I read this really great article, and I said, really, what was it about? How would you retell, right? Think about it if I asked you what you did this weekend. What'd you do last weekend? Friday night we went and we had pizza. Me and the guys, we all went and had pizza. And then Saturday I got with these people and we went over to so-and-so's house to play video games. And Sunday I just chilled, did my homework. You didn't give me every single detail. I didn't know what you ate for breakfast and lunch and what your snacks were. And I didn't get the names of all the people that you were hanging out with. And I didn't get all the different places you went to and all the different games you played and all the different stuff you did, right? No, you hit those big points. You hit the big pieces. That's what a summary is. And it gives you some ideas here of how to do that, right? How to approach this. The big piece, though, is your response. Like, what was your reaction to this? The introduction, I think, is a place to get people excited. The summary is a retelling. But this is where we really get to see you in the paper. And this was your reaction. What was your take on this? What did you think of it, right? What happened at that gut level, right? You were excited, shocked, surprised, angry, amazed, whatever, right? And then why? What in the text made you react that way? Where did you get that from, right? Like, what sparked that, right? Those are the key pieces here. This is probably going to be the bulk of your paper, right? Like, the majority of your paper is going to be this reaction, because that's what it's really about, right? That's what this paper is really about. And there's a lot of different ways for you to approach this, detailed there. We also wrap it up with the concluding paragraph. This is not a retelling of my thesis was this and my main point, my main point, my main point. This is just kind of parting shot, if you will. I always like to tell people that this is, if you had one chance, like if you wanted people to remember one thing, this is your one chance to make sure they remembered it, right? Like, they got done reading, they're walking away, say, oh, don't forget, right? Here it is. And again, you get the details of everything that you have to have here. Now, some things to think about in this paper. This is a personal reaction. So the use of the first person, I, me, my, is acceptable, okay? Because this is your reaction. This is your take. This is acceptable. Now, this will not be for the rest of our papers in this class, but for this one, because it is your take on it, it is acceptable. Now, I wouldn't put I on every single every single sentence, obviously, but it is acceptable in this work. Make sure that you cite your work, right? You start off very clearly in the introduction with the author and the title. When you pull in work from the text, maybe in the summary, definitely in the reaction, like this part here got me, you have to cite that. Make sure that you're using those in-text parentheticals documentation. Some things to think about as you are trying to do this paper. I really cannot recommend enough that you get some help. Okay, reach out. Now, obviously, you have the half draft, you have my reactions, you have my feedback, right? Like, you get to use that. If at some point working on this, if you're like, hey, I need some help with this, feel free to shoot me that email. Now, please don't send me your paper and say, what do you think? And then you want me to feedback the entire paper and send it back to you, make those corrections. That's not what that is. What that is a what that is an opportunity for you to ask me a very specific question. Can you take a look at my thesis? Do I really wrap up what I'm trying to say? Or I really need some help transitioning from this to this, right? Or is this the right way to do your citations? Ask me some very direct, pointed questions, okay? Don't be afraid to reach out to each other. You do have that capability. You do have that opportunity. Reach out to each other. The great thing is that you guys are all on the same side of the desk, right? And you have the assignment in front of you, but you might interpret it a little bit differently. Oh, I thought they meant this, or it gives you kind of perspective, right? And you guys have the same work and you have the same goal. So having their view on this, it can be very beneficial. Obviously, we don't want to overtax each other, right? Because they're trying to get their homework done too. But feel free to reach out and ask for some help from those people around you. You also do have this Tutor 24/7, this tutor.com 24/7. This is a free service that is available to you as an Ivy Tech student. I believe it's 25 hours. We are going to do an assignment on this later where you actually use this and you react to it in an assignment. But this is a online service where you go on, it assigns you a tutor, you send them your paper and you say, here's what I'm trying to do and here's what I need help with, right? It's a great service. It's a free service. I think it is very underutilized by our students, but you do have access to that. And you can always go to the closest Ivy Tech campus and go to the writing center there. All the Ivy Tech campuses have a tutoring center, homework center. Most places will call it a writing center. And if you go in and you generally don't have to sign up, although it wouldn't hurt, so you know that like you can walk right in and do your thing. But there'll be people there that you can show your paper, say, here's what I'm doing. Many of them will be familiar with these assignments already, right? Because these are universal across all of our campuses. And they can really give you some feedback too. Okay. But there are a lot of tools available to you. So please utilize those. And then finally, you submit the final draft. And again, this just rehashes the assignment for you. It walks you how to do the assignment. And then it also gives you the rubric by which it'll be graded. And I always love this. Like, take a look at that. Go in and look at that and see how it will be graded, because you can kind of really think about, like, I really want to focus on these areas, or it's really looking for this. Or for instance, your response is 30 points. Like, the biggest category is your response. And I just already said that's the bulk of your paper, right? Like, that's the real meat of it. So, think about like, oh, I really have to do this really well because that's going to be a third of the grade, right? So use that rubric as a guide for what you can do to improve your paper. All right. So that is module 3. I really, again, invite you to reach out if you have any questions. Email is always the best way. I can email you a response back at whatever time. But if you do need to call me or text me, you are welcome to that as well. It just won't be as fast of a response probably. Anytime you do send me something, please make sure to include the question. And if you're emailing, you can include the paper or the assignment as well if you have a specific question about that. Okay. So, but please make sure that you are reaching out if you need something, that I can provide that help for you. Okay. So again, module 3, we do the big paper. It's our first big paper. I hope that you have great success with it. Good luck, everybody.